The ocean was vast, endless in its expanse, a deep shimmering blue that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon itself. Beneath its surface, there lived creatures, both beautiful and terrifying, each part of the intricate web of life that bound the sea together. But there was one mermaid whose story stood apart from the others, a tale passed down through the generations like a whispered warning. Her name was Aliana, a mermaid with hair that shimmered like the stars and eyes that reflected the entire ocean in their depths. The songs she sang were so sweet they could coax the sun to rise and cause the moon to weep. But despite her beauty and grace, Aliana carried within her a curse that made her different, that marked her as both special and tragic in the eyes of the ocean's inhabitants. It began with a sea witch, a mysterious being who lived in the darkest depths, where even the bravest of sea creatures dared not venture. Legends said she was as old as the ocean itself, and her powers were known to be both awe-inspiring and terrifying. It was said that she could grant any wish, but the price of such power was often too great to bear. One fateful evening, Aliana had swum too close to the forbidden waters where the sea witch resided. Her curiosity had always been her greatest flaw, and on that particular day, it led her to the very heart of the deep. "Why do you come here, child of the surface?" A voice as smooth as the currents called out from the shadows. Aliana froze, her heart racing as she turned to face the voice. The sea witch emerged slowly from the darkness, her form both ethereal and menacing. I was curious, Aliana replied, her voice a mixture of awe and fear. "I have heard tales of your power, of how you can grant wishes." The sea witch smiled, her teeth glinting like shards of broken glass. "Ah, so it is power you seek? How predictable." Aliana nodded, her heart beating faster. "I wish to be free, free from the ocean's constraints, free from the endless depths that bind me to the water. I long to walk on land, to feel the earth beneath my feet." The sea witch's eyes glittered with dark amusement. "You wish to walk on land, little mermaid? Such desires come at a great cost." Aliana's heart fluttered with hope. "I am willing to pay whatever price it takes." The sea witch circled around her, her laughter echoing in the water like the rumble of distant thunder. "Very well, I will grant your wish, but remember, there is no turning back once the bargain is made." Aliana, blinded by her longing for the world above, agreed without hesitation. The sea witch raised her arms, and in a swell of dark magic, Aliana felt herself change. Her tail, once graceful and powerful, dissolved into a pair of human legs. The water that had always been her home felt colder, unfamiliar. But then came the twist, the curse that would haunt her for the rest of her days. "You are free to walk on land, child," the sea witch's voice whispered, "but your curse will be this. Whenever you step into the ocean again, you will lose your voice forever." Aliana's heart sank as the words settled into her mind. What? What do you mean I will lose my voice?" The sea witch's smile widened. "The ocean is a place of endless songs, and your voice is its most precious gift. But once you walk away from it, once you turn your back on the sea, you will no longer be able to sing. You will no longer be able to speak the language of the waves." Aliana wanted to protest, to beg for mercy, but the words caught in her throat. The magic had already taken hold. With a final wave of the sea, witch's hand, Aliana was left alone, standing at the edge of the water, her new legs trembling beneath her. She could feel the weight of the curse settling in, but for a moment she only thought of the land, the world she had longed for, the world of the humans. Aliana's first steps on land were clumsy, her legs unaccustomed to supporting her weight. The soft sand of the shore shifted beneath her, and for a brief moment she lost her balance, falling to the ground. She gasped in shock, a mix of pain and disbelief filling her. This was her new reality, no longer a creature of the sea, but something else entirely. Her fingers trembled as she pressed them into the warm sand, her heart pounding in her chest. As she rose to her feet again, she could hear the distant calls of gulls overhead, the sound of the wind rustling through the tall grass at the edge of the shore. The air, dry and thick with the scent of salt, was unfamiliar and strange to her, a sharp contrast to the endless currents of the ocean. She hesitated, taking in the vastness of the land before her. It was beautiful, yes, but also desolate in its own way. There was no song here, no constant flow of tides, only stillness and silence. Her heart sank as she realized that, for all her longing to escape the sea, she felt a deep emptiness now that she had left it behind. The world of humans was nothing like the world she had imagined, and worse, she could already feel the weight of the sea witch's curse settling upon her, but she would not let it break her spirit. She was free after all, free to walk on land, free to explore this new world. She would find a way to live here, to find a place where she belonged. Days passed, and Aliana wandered through forests and across rolling hills, searching for answers. She had no idea where she was or how to navigate this strange foreign world. She had been born beneath the waves, where everything was familiar, where the sea's currents had guided her every movement. Here on land, she felt lost and alone. Her first encounter with humans was both terrifying and exhilarating. She had heard of them, of course, of their ships and their cities, their strange ways, but she had never imagined that she would meet them face to face. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she found herself near a small village by the coast. She had been drawn to the sound of laughter and music, the warm glow of firelight flickering in the distance. Curious, she approached, her heart fluttering in her chest. As she neared the village, she saw a group of people gathered around a bonfire, singing songs and dancing. They seemed so full of life, so carefree, and Aliana couldn't help but feel a pang of longing. She longed to join them, to feel that warmth, but she knew that she couldn't. The sea witch's curse had already begun to take its toll. She took a deep breath and stepped closer to the group, hoping to watch from the shadows, to feel a part of their joy without actually joining them. But as she stepped forward, one of the villagers, a young man with dark hair and a bright smile, spotted her. His eyes widened with surprise, then softened with curiosity. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice kind but cautious. Aliana froze. She could hear him clearly, but as she opened her mouth to respond, no sound came. Her throat tightened as she tried again, but the silence was deafening. She pressed her fingers to her lips in shock, realizing that the curse was already taking effect. The young man took a step closer, his expression one of concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, his gaze scanning her face as if searching for an answer. She nodded, but the words she longed to speak, words that might explain who she was, what had happened to her, remained trapped inside her. She wanted to scream, to shout her frustration, but there was nothing, only the soft haunting sound of the wind. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, a strange understanding nothing passing between them. Finally, the young man offered her a warm smile, as if he didn't expect an answer. "You are welcome to join us," he said gently. "There is no need to be alone out here." Aliana's heart ached with longing as he watched the firelight dance in his eyes. She could not speak, but she could feel the truth of his words deep within her. She was not truly alone, not yet. The young man led her to the fire, where she sat in silence as the others continued their song and dance. She watched, captivated by their movements, the way their voices blended with the crackling of the flames. Despite her inability to join in, she felt a small flicker of warmth in her chest, a reminder that she was not entirely lost. As the night wore on, the village folk began to quiet down, and one by one, they made their way to their homes. The young man, who had first spoken to her, stayed by her side, offering her a kind smile as they both watched the stars twinkle above them. "You don't talk much, do you?" he said with a chuckle, though it was clear he meant no offense. Aliana's lips parted as she tried once more to find her voice. She tried to speak, to offer even the smallest of sounds, but once again there was nothing. She lowered her gaze, ashamed and heartbroken, but the young man didn't seem to mind. Instead, he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever it is that has happened to you," he said softly, "I'm sure we can figure it out. You don't have to be alone anymore." Aliana felt a tear slip down her cheek, though she didn't know why. Was it because of the kindness in his words, or was it the realization that she might never hear her own voice? The weight of her curse pressed on her heart like a stone, but for the first time since stepping onto land, she felt a flicker of hope. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. The young man, whose name was Lorian, showed Aliana the village, introducing her to the people who lived there. They were kind, offering her food, shelter, and friendship, but no matter how much they tried to include her, she could not escape the curse that bound her to silence. The more time she spent with them, the more she realized how much she had lost. Her ability to communicate, to sing, to connect with the world around her, all of it was slipping away, piece by piece. But Loria remained by her side, never once questioning her silence. He spoke to her with patience, and though he never knew the true depth of her sorrow, he seemed to understand her better than anyone else ever could. One evening, as they walked along the shore, Aliana gazed out at the ocean, her heart torn between two worlds. She could still hear the faint whispers of the waves calling to her, and a part of her longed to return to them, but she knew the price she would pay. Her voice, her very essence, would be lost forever. Lorian turned to her, his expression serious but kind. "You don't have to stay here if you don't want to," he said softly. "If the sea is calling to you, you should follow it. But I think you should know, we will always be here, no matter what." Aliana's heart wavered. She longed to return to the ocean, to sing with its waves once more, but she also longed to remain here, with Lorian, with the village that had taken her in. She was caught between two worlds, and neither one could offer her a true solution. He reached out and took Lorian's hand, a silent answer to his words. Aliana stood at the edge of the shore, Lorian's hand resting gently in hers. The ocean stretched before her, vast and unknowable, its waves whispering a haunting song that called to her with a pull stronger than anything she had ever felt before. It was the same pull that had driven her to make a fatal bargain with the sea witch all those months ago, but now, standing there with Lurian, she felt the full weight of her curse. The ocean was within her reach, yet so far away. The causes effect had settled into her like an unshakable shadow. Each time she thought of speaking, of reaching out to express the longing that twisted within her, the silence stifled her. Worse still, every time she stepped too close to the water, a sharp ache would fill her chest as if the very essence of who she was being torn away. I don't know what to do, Aliana thought. A thought so clear it was almost a whisper in her mind. She longed to speak these words aloud, to voice her agony, but she knew it was futile. Lorian, ever perceptive, seemed to understand something of her struggle. His eyes softened with concern, but there was a quiet strength in his gaze. The sea has always been a part of you, he said, his voice gentle as they both stood silently before the waves. But you don't have to choose between the two. Not unless you want to. Aliana turned to him, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and longing. It was as though he had sensed the very conflict waging within her. She had been torn between two worlds ever since she had stepped onto land, and the sea's voice had become a constant ache in her heart. Would she ever be whole again? Could she ever reconcile the ocean within her with the life that was slowly beginning to take root on land? Her gaze fell to the sea once more, and for a moment the whisper of the waves seemed to grow louder, more insistent. There was something there, something calling to her, just beyond the horizon. It was as though the ocean had not forgotten her, even if she had tried to forget it. I can't stay away forever, Aliana thought again, a deep yearning filling her chest. She could not ignore the call of the sea, but what would it cost her this time? Lorian squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to leave, you know. I don't want you to feel like you have to choose. If the sea is calling to you, you can go, but I will be here. Always, you are not alone in this. Aliana looked at him, a swell of emotions she couldn't name rising in her heart. For so long, she had felt alone in her curse, trapped in her own silence. But Lorian, with his unwavering kindness and his understanding, had become a lifetime she hadn't expected. The days that followed were filled with quiet contemplation. Aliana spent her mornings by the shore, listening to the endless song of the ocean, feeling its call deep in her bones. But she also spent her evenings with Lorian and the villagers, slowly becoming a part of the small community. They taught her to communicate in ways other than words, through gestures, through written letters, and even through music. Though her voice was silent, her soul was still alive with music, and she found solace in the rhythms and melodies the villagers created with simple instruments. It was during one of these evening gatherings, as the stars twinkled above and the warmth of the fire cracked in the air, that Aliana finally felt herself begin to heal. Her curse had not disappeared, but she had learned to live with it, to adapt in ways she never thought possible. Still, the ocean remained a constant presence in her heart. One moonless night, as she sat by the edge of the village, watching the sea stretch endlessly into the darkness, she heard something different this time. The song of the waves had changed. It was no longer a beckoning call, but a whisper, soft and laced with sorrow. It felt like a plea, as if the ocean itself were mourning her absence. She closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of the tides within her. The ache in her chest grew stronger. Should I return? Aliana thought, her heart torn. Would I ever return and break their curse? The thought of losing her voice forever until the witch's words echoed in her mind, a warning that had always felt too final. Once she stepped into the water again, once she returned to the ocean, the curse would take the final piece of her. Her voice would be lost, her connection to the world above would be severed. But even with the curse looming over her, Aliana knew one thing with certainty. The ocean was her true home. It was where she had been born, where she had sung her first song, where the world had once felt old. Could she truly live without it? As the days passed, she found herself glued to the water again, not to abandon Lorien, not to forsake the life she had built on land, but because the sea, with all its beauty and danger, was woven into her very being. It was part of her, just as she was part of it. One evening, when the moon was high and the village was quiet, Aliana stood once more at the water's edge. She closed her eyes, listening to the waves, feeling the pull deep within her. The curse would claim her voice forever if she stepped into the water, but perhaps it didn't matter. Aliana stepped forward, her legs carrying her into the cool embrace of the ocean. The moment her toes touched the water, she felt the familiar rush of energy, the pulse of the sea flooding her veins. But this time, she did not hesitate. She closed her eyes, letting the water swallow her as it always had. The waves rising up around her like old friends. The water lapped at her skin, cool and comforting, and the world above her seemed to disappear. But it wasn't as terrifying as she had feared. The silence was profound, but it was not empty. It was the silence of a voice too ancient to be spoken, a voice that was felt in every ripple and wave. And then, as though the ocean itself were welcoming her back, Aliana began to sing. It was a song that had no words, a song woven from the current and the tides, a song that spoke of longing, of loss, and of return. It was a song that echoed through the sea and through her very soul, the one song that she could sing now, the only song that needed no voice. The curse was still there, and Aliana knew it would never truly lift, but she realized something in that moment. The curse had not taken everything from her. It had stolen her voice, yes, but it had not stolen her essence. Her connection to the world she loved. The sea had always been a part of her, and no curse could change that. When she emerged from the water, breathless and renewed, she found Lorien waiting for her, standing at the shore with a knowing look in his eyes. "You found your voice, didn't you?" he asked quietly, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Aliana nodded. Though her lips remained still, she could not speak the words, but she did not need to. The music of the ocean was enough.